Welcome to Interpreting Wine's first ever series looking at the category of port. This series will bust a lot of myths about this often misunderstood beverage, discussing the history and evolution of the style, a tasting of representative styles, and an in-depth conversation with a world-famous producer. If you've ever wanted to deepen your knowledge about the world of port, then do listen on. And if you'd either like to listen to the whole series or share this series with a friend, do head to interpretingwine.com/port19. Today's episode of the Port series features Grigoriou, the wine Mojo, leading a tasting of 6 ports. Specially chosen to illustrate the diversity of the wine category, we taste in order a white port, a late bottled vintage, a reserve ruby port, a vintage port, and finally a 10 and a 20-year-old Tawny. Dia also looks ahead to the health of the port category. Enjoy!
We'll start with the white port. I have chosen a selection of Graham's ports today. We'll talk later a bit about a few of the shippers there, and the lots. Most of them are English. They're Scottish. They're from the Netherlands or from German descent. All the people that gathered in Portugal back in the day. Anyway, so I chose Graham's because they have this lovely little taster pack here, what encompasses a lot of their styles. And we'll start with the white port. I've decided to split the tasting of the very same white port into 2. One is the way the Portuguese drink it. So if you ever go to Portugal on a hot summer's day, everybody's sitting, especially in Porto, sitting in cafes or wineries or wine places around the banks of the Douro, and all they do is they enjoy this lovely white port, which is very refreshing. And that actually reminds me, can I please say, port is not just for the winter. Okay, so we can enjoy a very lovely glass of port in the summer as well, and that's why these subcategories or categories have started. So white port comes from 2 varieties mainly. There's lots of varieties involved in port, but the 2 main ones is Malvasia Fina and Grigoriou. Okay. So the first we try is like a form of a cocktail. So what you do, you put a shot of white port, a lime, some mint, and tonic. And it's an absolutely refreshing starter drink. It's like a lovely aperitif. You can start your meal with that before going into the heavy stuff. Okay. It is lovely. You can, I think it is the summer drink. If you have, you can buy a bottle for around £13 or something, and you can make about 10, 12 drinks out of this. And we drink it in our house. We sit in our garden on a summer's day, and all we drink is make that. You can also mix with fruit and make it like quite similar to a Pimm's, but not really a Pimm's. But, it does, I find the taste might remind you of that as well. Then let's try the white on its own, just to see how it, how it is before it's affected by tonic and mint and all that. I find it has a sort of like a nose of citrus, peel and pears, and some apples there. Again, it's sweet, but it also has this Malvasia aromatic sort of essence to it. Very lovely. Finishes on a citrus note. Really beautiful. Nice, refreshing. These ports, as a simple white port, I don't know if it's a blasphemy for wine people around, but I would put an ice cube in there, or I would stick it in the fridge and enjoy it. Very cool.
I'm not sure that it is blasphemy or not, but again, I'm a firm believer that have it how you want to have it. If you enjoy it with an ice cube, have it with an ice cube. Have it chilled, have it however you want. I guess they're just keen for people to drink it. But I've got to say, it's really interesting having it those 2 ways, and I'm really surprised actually having it by itself, because that really shows the complexity of it. Like, it's got a super long finish, and it's something we might get into a little bit later. But I would imagine that at that price point, it's a lot more complex than a lot of the other wines that would be around at that same price point.
Indeed, and I need to talk a bit about the styles of white out there that are even more complex than this classic simple white. Okay, we have a white colheita, as we call it, again only from white grapes, from a single year. And the wine has been aged in small barrels for about 7 years. Okay. Again, as always with colheitas, they're single harvest wines from 1 year, but the more time they spend in the barrel, the more intense and oxidative character flavors they bring out. It could have been more deeper, jammy fruit, more apricot, more, and also these white ports, the colheitas, are quite rare. Not many people age a white port and make it into a white colheita. Hence, sometimes their price tag, as compared to a classic white port, is quite high. So we should keep that in mind as well. And don't get shocked if you see a 2008 colheita for about £39. Okay, that is a price difference. Okay, but the quality and the depth of flavors, the complexity, the finish, the long finish, and also the time the winemaker devoted to leave that in the barrel without producing it early means that it has a higher price compared to other ports. Okay. Also, apart from the colheita, there are white ports with indication of age, similar to the Tawnys, but again, extensive barrel aging, okay, and it's a matter of blending. It's a matter of the winemaker with the IVDP tasting this wine and thinking, oh, this white port that was aged extensively in the barrels seemed to have a style of a 10-year-old white port that would have spent approximately that time in barrels. And they do come in white 10-year-old, white 20-year-old, white 30-year-old, and white 40-year-old. Again, a very rare category, very hard to find these wines, and very expensive as well. Okay, next one to try would be within the ruby category. We mentioned earlier LBV, the late bottled vintage. Again, as we said, it's a port that has spent about 4 to 7 years in the barrel. A bigger barrel, so it had a bit of oxidation going in there and giving like a little twist and a little sort of spicy character to this port. This is the 2012 grams late bottled vintage. Let's give it a try. You can smell, actually, when you put your nose through the glass, it's actually the spice coming through, and also this red fruit that we mentioned, a little bit more like raspberry type, okay, a bit of freshness there, but also what I find has some spice going through it, a hint of spice as well, maybe some cinnamon in there, which is, derivative of the aging as well. Quite important to look as well in the glass of an LBV and check a bit on the rim. You'll see it's a bit more watery and it turns into a little bit of a garnet, yeah? And that actually shows that the wine has spent some time in the barrel. It is fresh, it is filtered, it's ready to drink now and very fruity. Right, so after the LBV, I have chosen to go for a Reserve Ruby port. Reserve Ruby is like a better ruby than the ruby, than the simple ruby. There's no other simple way to say this, okay. And actually, this specific one is called 6 grapes. You can see that on the bottle. It has these 6 grapes in the form of a sort of triangle, which is actually the grapes that Grahams used to put on their barrels to signify that the grapes that went into that bottle were picked from 6 different vineyards that belong to the Symington family. Okay. So that's a significance, a historic significance, and it's actually one of the better reserve ports out there. I find it really, really tasty. Let's give it a go and try. Let's put our nose through it. I find here that the nose gets into more of a darker fruit territory, more black fruits. Again, that's like more spicy, maybe more clove rather than cinnamon. It gets a bit like, a hint of chocolate. No, it's absolutely lovely on the nose. Quite aromatic, actually, I find. So it's got a bit of a more pronounced nose than other ports. Okay, I'll give it a taster. One of the things I've noticed with this port compared to the LBV that we tried earlier is the amount of tannins coating your gums. Now, if you go back to your LBV, you'll find that the aging has softened the tannins. So, in the LBV, they're soft, well integrated. They follow with the fruitiness of the port. It's ready to drink now. The 6 grapes, you find the intensity of the tannins as well, but not in a bad way, not in a very attacking way that we'll see later on with the vintage. That's where you'll get shocked, but it's actually really approachable, rich, full-bodied reserve ruby. That's like a very good quality one. I absolutely love 6 grapes. And shall we move to the vintage now? So... okay, what I've chosen for a vintage, it's actually not in the taster pack, but it's something that I was really lucky to have or be given through work. It is a Cockburn's vintage port from the very recently declared 2016 vintage. Okay, we'll try a bit. This is, as explained previously, when it comes to vintage port, the newer vintage, this vintage is not ready to drink yet. We try to see the components and how they'll develop later on through the years. We can see that it's a very dark port, very deep purple, I would call it even, yes? Okay, very dark. Let's give it a try. You see on the nose, this is absolutely fantastic. I get mint, I get cedar, I get blackberry, I get a lot of black fruit, black cherry, all of these like jammy flavors and compressed, just like very complex, and also a lot of spice. And you can see the difference in moving into from the reserve ruby to vintage. Let's give it a try. Wow. I just find the finish, the acidity mouth-watering. The tannins are there, okay, to support this wine aging further and keep on evolving the bottle. The finish is really long and all the flavors follow through. I can still feel that chocolatey, I can still feel that blackberry, blackcurrant as well. Okay, and a hint of the spices coming through. It is a fantastic port. On the vintage, yes, just to say, all vintage port is released 2 years after the harvest. So it spends a bit in the barrel, and then the producer puts it in the bottle for it to evolve further and change through the years. Vintage port is sold pretty much like Bordeaux and Primeur campaign. So in the spring, following 2 years after the vintage, there will be an Primeur campaign for many merchants here in the UK. Vintage Wine and Port does one as well. Okay, we invite the people that like port to buy this. Just to say that port is for the long term and it is an investment grade commodity because it is... so now we tried the 2016, okay? We tried this now from a cask sample, okay? The recommendation to start drinking this style of port is 10 years after the vintage. So it's still really young. It hasn't really showed its true colours. So from 2026, this will be available to drink, and it will keep for another 40 to 50 years, according to cellaring. If you cellar it properly, if you want to invest in wine, port is a good option. I'd suggest going for declared vintages initially, and maybe some off-the-grid vintages that not many people declared, because in the future, someone will look for them.
To be honest with you there, I think you did such a good job of describing that. I think my only real, thing to add is just to compliment you, really, I'd have to say, just on breaking down those three different styles, I think in serving them in that order, in going back to the LBV, and I think just for me now, really clarifying a lot about what the ruby style actually means in the glass. And, as a self-confessed, I'm not somebody who has drunk a lot of port in my time. I'm not somebody who's bought a lot of port in my time, but it sounds like, maybe I should look at 2016.
Right, so moving along, our final category is the Tawnies. We left these at the end because all the tannins have mellowed through. It has spent considerable time in the barrel. What we're dealing with today is I've chosen to bring, again, through that Graham's testing pack, a Graham's 10-year-old Tawny and a Graham's 20-year-old Tawny. I'll explain a bit about the Tawny of indication of age, which is one of the most famous Tawny sort of styles. So these come into 10, 20, 30 and 40-year-olds. Okay. And the age is not the amount of time the port has spent in the barrel, because these are made quite in a very specific way. It's a blending procedure. They have a master blender who has such an exceptional palate. The year after year makes the same exactly recipe with all the barrels that have been staying in the cellars. Okay, so let's say a 20-year-old port that was bottled in 1970s, okay, and labelled as 20-year-old Tawny will taste the same as a 20-year-old that was bottled today. Okay, but the master blender has to stick to the house style. So a Taylor's 10 will taste the same in the 70s, the same now. A Graham's 20, the same then and the same now. Okay, and these are classified. So we take a bit. What happens is we take a little bit of 1970s, a little bit of 2000s, a little bit of 1980, a little bit of and make a very nice recipe. And when we refer to the 10, it's a matter of style. Is how that wine would have tasted like if it had spent 10 years in the barrel. Okay, these are not single harvest wines. These are a blend of various vintages. Okay, therefore they will never have a vintage on the bottle. Okay, so the winemaker and the IVDP go and taste. They form a panel. They taste these lovely ports, and we'll start with our 10-year-old here. The first thing I get is caramel. Straight on caramel. Also, some dried fruit in there. And then you taste this port. It's completely different to a ruby. Although the grapes were red, the extensive barrel aging has actually twisted this style into a caramel, dried figs, dried prunes, or prunes are dried fruit, sultanas. Okay, you get a lot of that dried grape flavour. Okay, and a very nice finish. It's very silky, All this glycerol rising in the barrel have made this a very smooth mouthfeel. Okay, no tannins whatsoever. It is a lovely port. And I'll compare it with the 20-year-old, which is the classic staple style. If you do want to go for a Tawny port with an indication of age, definitely go for a 20-year-old because it's a classic style, okay? It encompasses both worlds, the early, like such as the 10-year-old, and the latter ones, such as the 30 or the 40, okay? And if you want something exceptionally rich, where you can sit in your armchair late at night, go for a 40. Okay, so let's try the 20-year-old. It's quite viscous in the glass. If you look at both of these glasses side by side in terms of color, you will realize that the little more red pigments that the 10-year-old has in comparison with the 20-year-old. And the 20-year-old is a bit more lighter in color. Have you noticed that? Yes, absolutely. And that obviously shows the further time it has spent in the barrel, which actually has changed its color to a lighter style. Still Tawny's. They look fantastic. Let's try the 20. You understand what I mean now? And the nose, again, is rich and buttery and has that butterscotch and caramel note. And also, it just reveals a bit of more of a nutty character, this one. Some walnuts in there, like even the fresh walnuts sometimes you get. I don't know if you were lucky enough. I was born in Greece and my auntie had a walnut tree next door and we just used to eat them fresh, but even that, it is fantastic. Again, the finish is rich. The mouth feel is, you can see it in the glass, is viscous, it's very soft, it's very, silky almost. Again, sweet. I would suggest for Tawny ports, so in comparison to vintage or rubies, to have them slightly chilled before trying. Again, a Tawny port can make a really good summer drink for that reason, because sometimes I find the alcohol can appear really harsh. Not always, but you know what I mean. And not in this case, but if you chill them a little bit, they absolutely reveal a more fresh character. It's quite important to say about the Tawny ports that a vintage bottling date is really important at the back label. And many producers write that to show that this has been bottled recently. Okay, and it has retained all its freshness. Don't get me wrong, this wine will not change further. It will remain as it is. A very slow, gradual change might happen in the bottle, but not really. What's happened already has happened in the barrel. It's ready now. You don't need to age it or keep it further as you would with a vintage. Okay, and hence it's always good with Tawny ports or similar styles such as Collitas, which is a Tawny from a single year, as we mentioned, to always check the date at the back. The bottling date shows how fresh this wine is.
Yeah, again, super impressed with that level of detail. And you've actually gone into an area that I'm super interested in, which is around the fact that you can chill these Tawny ports. And my mind immediately goes to the chilling of red wines and, things like rosé. And they're just thinking about versatility. So I'm curious to get a sense from you about, I guess the health of the port industry and its ability to, I guess, update itself, to retain its relevance. And then also, I think, very importantly linked to that is around how it communicates that it is staying relevant and is staying up to date.
Right, the port industry is a staple industry. Okay, first of all, I'll explain a bit what they've done to come up to the present, okay? And one of these things we tried today is the white port. It's very much communicated lately. A lot of brands, such as Graham's, are now producing different styles of white port, okay? They've now released in the UK market a white port called Number 5. The bottle is very appealing. It looks like a gin bottle. The creation in 2008 of the rosé port to capture all this trend in the wine world for rosé and lighter style, okay, wines. So that's another advancement that they've made to bring the port industry up to date and to the present. Also, we should mention that a lot of these early drinking styles, such as the white, the rosé, the ruby, but as well as also the Tawny as well, can be used as blending partners in cocktails. This is a massive trend. The amount of cocktails out there involving some sort of port, it's crazy. And I can follow up with some recipes, but at a later date. But I do like it. I did do it in the summer. It's an excellent drink. Now, as I mentioned earlier, port industry is a staple. If you make a wine list, for example, you have to include a port. Port is a wine style, you know what I mean? It's a wine category of its own. It is a fortified wine category, as is sherry. Okay, they may have the ups and downs. Okay, as the sherry industry had its ups and downs. Similarly, the port industry, only because consumers tend now to go towards a drier style of wines rather than sweet. Okay, however, I think with these new additions and also keeping up the quality, they're absolutely getting there. And also, port is for the long term. Okay. Apart from releasing all these newer styles, we have the Tonys that have been kept in barrel for years and years. The vintage that's aged in the bottle. So these are long-term investments. These winemakers have a lot of port staying in their cellars, and that's going to be sold, and it's going to keep on going forward. If I was a person that had a restaurant, I would definitely include some port. Definitely a Tawny, and then if people get to learn it more, I would definitely keep a vintage on there, especially from an older vintage, because it is something so unique, so flavoursome. It is absolutely fantastic. So you ought to have that as a category, as you would have a white, as you would have a white, a red, a rosé, a sherry and a port, So therefore, I don't think the category will go out of business in a way. But luckily, the producers are keep on coming to the modern age, and they release all this lovely stuff. And also, they're promoting their... the amount of information on port out there, the videos that brands such as Taylor's or Graham's are putting out, and they have blogs dedicated to port industry and creation. They have video material that you can see. Their presence on social media is quite intense, on Instagram. Every day, I can see, because I'm a big fan. So therefore, I see it. So the presence is there. I need to say that port is something, especially for the more robust styles, it is a wine that would appeal more to a seasoned drinker, a person that would try a bit more, unless you have a sweet tooth and you go straight to the sweeties, it would appeal to maybe a person that's tried a lot and he's sort of trying that side of a more fortified wine style. And then, the revelation starts as you go through the different styles, as we did today.
Lastly, just a huge thank you. It's great to have you on and have you talking about something you're obviously, so passionate about. And again, it's back to why I do what I do. It's like we could have just sat down and done this ourselves, but I'm really just super happy to be able to share this with people who maybe, like myself, weren't, self-confessed port fans, or didn't have the confidence even, because it is a fairly complicated area. It's a fairly in-depth area, and I think you've unpicked a lot of that, especially in terms of the history, which explains, I think, the complexities. And really, just to sign off, I just ask you to look ahead and let us know what you've got going into the future.
Right, first of all, thank you so much for giving me the chance to explain these things about ports. The knowledge is endless, and I've yet to learn so much more. But thanks for giving me that opportunity. In terms of me as Dia, I still keep on working at vintage wine and ports. I love it because it has a very extensive, ports from older vintages, quite something that I'm really interested in. Another thing I really want to push forward is my personal brand, which is the Wine Mojo. I'm on Instagram. It started as a personal blog when I have some time to write about all the stuff I try, and hopefully someone is interested to read about it. But apart from that, what I really want to do and moving forward to the future is do my own tasting events where I can explain a bit about different wine styles. Just finishing my WSET diploma now, so a couple more exams to go, fingers crossed. Looking forward to doing my own tasting events, but also an area I'd really like to delve into is sort of consult businesses on purchasing a wine, but also give consultation of people that want to buy wine as an investment.
Thank you so much, Dia, once again. I think between this and the last episode, you will have demystified port for many of my listeners, and I hope that you've given some of them a start into this fascinating category. If you'd like to share this episode with a friend, do please send them to interpretingwine.com/porttasting19. Do also be sure to check below for Dia's links as the Wine Mojo, both website and social media handles. And do be sure to tune in next time on the podcast in episode 352 for a port masterclass with one of the world's foremost producers, Dirk Nieport. See you then.